I've said it more than enough times at this point, but if you really want to understand sometimes and get a different political view of what is going on in the UK, you've really got to look at papers from across the pond or elsewhere. And very often, things like the Irish Times are fantastic to go and look at. And in this case, we are looking at a foreign newspaper, but not the Irish Times this time. We are looking at the Sydney Morning Herald, because like last time when we covered this Australian mess as it was at the time, because again, Liz Truss had been essentially name-calling her counterpart as being inexperienced when he had far more experience, and this has ultimately shone through from what we have seen. And once again, today we turn to our Australian papers to see that they are quite frankly celebrating, and as they are about to very, very clearly put it, their Prime Minister really didn't need this trade deal. Johnson did. And just as last time, as they very clearly said, very, very clearly said, they went, we don't need this trade deal, but the UK is desperate for it. And as a result, Australia has well and truly bent the UK over a barrel, and we have received an absolute spanking. An absolute well and true spanking to this. We have already seen, for the supposed leaks from Cambria, that the supposed 15-year transition period of getting rid of the tariffs is not there. While so essentially from day one, tariffs are gone. And just a couple of weeks ago, I said how Australia were literally prepared to walk away if they did not get this. So Australia has got everything it could ever possibly want, even in its wildest dreams. And all we got in return was Tim Tams. Or Tam Tams. Again, not a very good trade deal. Not a very good start to what was meant to be the first big UK trade deal from scratch since Brexit. So we turn, as always, to the Sydney Morning Herald. But before we go down under, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And of course, the YouTube memberships are now open as well. And thank you to everyone who does support the channel that way. So, on with the article. Like I say, this comes from the Sydney Morning Herald, and the title is, Johnson needed the trade deal a lot more than Morrison. When Scott Morrison stood in the Cornwall churchyard a few days ago and said that he was prepared to wait for the right trade deal with Britain rather than a rushed one, he really wasn't bluffing. Australia has wanted the new trade agreement, but unlike Britain, it has been in no screaming hurry for it. And unlike Boris Johnson, the Australian Prime Minister faces no domestic imperative to actually seal the deal. Brexit has forced the United Kingdom to look beyond its own horizons, but the coronavirus pandemic has turned Australia inwards. The so-called quiet Australians who propelled Morrison to an unlikely electoral victory in 2019 are not focused on international trade right now. And while the new economic pact will be helpful to some Australian businesses and workers, it will not make a huge difference against the backdrop of a strong post-recession economy and an established export markets in Asia. So even they're like, yeah, we've signed this with you, but hey, Asia's far more important to us. Why? Because it's closer. Closer markets are far more important. I cannot stress the thing that what they're talking about is what we've discussed all the time, trade gravity. It is a thing. And even they, in here, have pretty much just said it. Okay, thanks, but we've got bigger markets and better markets to concentrate on. And like I say, this is going to come at the expense of us. Like I say, this trade deal does nothing but benefit Australia, something to which apparently Brexiteers were against when we were in the EU. But Again, there you go. So, he continues. Morrison could have very happily left Downing Street on Tuesday morning without even signing an agreement in principle, and have asked for more weeks or months to try and continue negotiations over the tricky issues such as agricultural access and work visas. However, this would have been a complete disaster for Johnson. The British Prime Minister has been so hungry for a resolution because striking the first trade deal since Britain has left the EU on the 1st of January helps him argue that Brexit has indeed given the UK the freedom to seek its own deals on its own terms. It doesn't matter that the overall gains are indeed small, and Whitehall officials have even predicted the deal with Australia would lift the GDP in the UK by £500 million a year. This would lift the UK's economy by a grand 0.02%. Again, £500 million is a lot of money to you and I, but when you're talking world international economies, that's just a single drop in the ocean. But there are other compelling motivations for this deal. It won't help smooth the way for Britain to try and join the 11 Nations Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it sends a good message to less market-friendly nations and like-minded countries they are still committed to open trading. Johnson knows this, as does his Trade Secretary Liz Truss. Having the Australian Prime Minister in London failing to seal the deal would have been a dent in Johnson's standing among his pro-Brexit base, and delighted Remainers who have always wanted new trade deals would be harder to negotiate in real life. No deal this week would have also emboldened the small but influential band of protectionists within the Conservative Party. The most remarkable aspect of this is that one of the people who held the gravest concerns about the impact of an Australian free trade deal on the British farmers was Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove. Gove was one of the biggest cheerleaders for Brexit. He and the others from the Vote Leave campaign talked a big game on how, unleashed from the shackles of Brussels, Britain would be able to forge a suite of free trade deals around the globe. But when it came time to embrace free trade, he completely bottled it. Those who know Gove will say the shape of such shifting things is not out of character. Morrison was right to essentially tell business leaders that at a function in London on Monday, that if Australia couldn't do business with the UK, one of its oldest friends and allies, who could? In the end, Johnson agreed and the pen was put to paper. Now let's see the detail. And we are still, at the moment, waiting for these details. But already, the worrying sign is that the tariff that were meant to last 15 years on the imports of beef have essentially been scrapped from day one. This will cause huge problems to UK farming. This is pretty much the death knell for small to medium farms. Our farms cannot anywhere come near close to competing against the Australian farms. Not only that, this will destroy our regulations as well. We have regulations, and a lot of these Brexiteers are saying, oh, don't worry, these regulations are still in place. But the problem is, those details could very well mean, even though we have these regulations in place, that Australia will still be allowed to import that meat anyway. This is an absolute disaster on an epic scale. Trade deals like this are not discussed not signed in less than 6 weeks. But it just goes to show you the absolute desperation that Johnson was in. Even the Australians here can clearly see just how much they wanted it. So who knows what else is in the detail of this bill? And like always, when they make a huge song and dance about it, that's it. They never talk about the details that are in the bill. And the second these come to light, I can guarantee you there is going to be an almighty reaction against it. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, as well as a link to one donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who support me, and we'll see you all next time.